I'm Daisy, 32 female. I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment in a city that always feels like it's moving faster than I am, which is why I love my quiet, stable little corner of it. I work as a marketing manager for a mid-sized tech company, a job that's demanding but rewarding, allowing me the kind of independence I've worked for my entire adult life. It was this hard-won stability that my own sister, Willow, decided to shatter in the most calculated and cruel way imaginable. This is the story of how she betrayed my trust, and how a simple security camera gave me the power to take back control. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. My sister Willow has always been what our mom, Carol, charitably calls a free spirit. I call it being directionless and irresponsible. At 25, 7 years my junior, she drifted from one couch to the next, one gig to another, never quite finding her footing. Her latest drama involved getting kicked out of her shared apartment after, surprise, failing to pay her share of the rent for 3 consecutive months. The phone call came, as it always did, late on a Tuesday night. It wasn't Willow who called, but our mom. "Daisy, honey, it's about your sister," Carol began, her voice already laced with that familiar tone of weary apology. "She's in a bit of a jam." I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose as I stared at a spreadsheet on my laptop. "What is it this time, Mom?" "Her roommates were just awful to her. They threw all her things out on the sidewalk. She has nowhere to go." I knew the roommates. They weren't awful, they were just tired of funding Willow's lifestyle. "Mom, we both know that's not the whole story." "Does it matter?" she asked, her voice cracking slightly. "She's your sister, she's family. She just needs a place to stay for a little while, just until she gets back on her feet." This was the classic refrain. A little while in Willow's world could mean anything from a week to 6 months. Getting back on her feet was a mythical state of being she never quite achieved. I had my reservations, a whole chorus of them singing in my head, reminding me of the last 3 times I'd lent her money she never paid back, or the time she'd borrowed my favorite jacket and sold it. But the guilt, expertly wielded by our mother, was a powerful tool. I had a spare couch, a steady income, and a sense of familial duty that had been drilled into me since childhood. "Fine," I relented. "She can stay on the couch, but Mom, this is the last time, I'm serious. She needs to get a job and be actively looking for a new place. I'm not a hotel." "Oh, thank you, sweetie. You have such a good heart," Carol gushed, relief flooding her voice. "She'll be so grateful. I promise she'll be on her best behavior." The next day, Willow arrived with 2 duffel bags and a box of art supplies, looking less like a homeless person and more like someone on an extended, inconvenient vacation. She immediately made herself at home, taking over the living room with her clutter and complaining that my Wi-Fi was slower than her last place. For the first week, she was the model guest. She did the dishes once. She walked a neighbor's dog for a few bucks. She even talked enthusiastically about applying for barista jobs, though I never saw her actually fill out an application. Her new boyfriend, Shane, started coming around. He was a lanky guy with shifty eyes and a knack for showing up right around dinner time. He never spoke much, just grunted hellos and stared at my TV. I didn't like him, and I got the distinct impression he was sizing up my apartment, not as a home, but as a collection of assets. My mom would call every few days for a progress report. "How's she doing? Is she settling in okay?" "She's here," I'd say, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. "Shane is over a lot. They ate the last of the ice cream I was saving." "Oh, be nice, Daisy. Young love," Mom would chirp. "Just be patient with her. Her confidence is a little fragile right now." Fragile confidence seemed to be the excuse for everything. It was why she couldn't hold down a job, why she couldn't pay her bills, and why she was entitled to my space, my food, and my patience rent-free. 2 weeks turned into 4, and then 6. My living room was now her permanent bedroom. Her canvases and paint tubes were stacked against my bookshelf. Shane was a near-constant presence, and I'd often come home from a long day at work to find them sprawled on my couch, watching my Netflix on my TV, having eaten food I paid for. I tried to set boundaries. I created a chore chart, which she ignored. I told her Shane couldn't stay over on weeknights, a rule she broke the very next day. Each attempt to enforce rules was met with sighs, eye rolls, and accusations. F being uptight and controlling. The atmosphere in my own home became tense and suffocating. I felt like a stranger, a landlord in a building where the tenants had all the rights. I started staying late at the office just to avoid going home. The haven I had built for myself was being systematically dismantled by the hurricane I had willingly let through the door. I knew a breaking point was coming. I just didn't realize it would be a complete and total shatter. The breaking point arrived on a Wednesday morning, exactly 2 months after Willow had moved in. The night before had been particularly grating. I had a huge presentation the next day, a project I'd been leading for weeks, and I needed to do a final run-through. I came home around 8 p.m. to find Willow and Shane in the middle of a loud, dramatic argument in my living room. The TV was blaring, and empty pizza boxes were stacked on my coffee table. "I told you not to talk to him," Willow shrieked, throwing a couch cushion at him. "He's my friend, I can talk to whoever I want," Shane yelled back, his voice echoing in the small apartment. "Excuse me," I said, my voice tight. "I need to work. Can you please take this somewhere else, or at least keep it down?" Willow shot me a look of pure venom. "Oh, sorry to interrupt your perfect, important life, Daisy. Some of us have real problems." I took a deep breath, refusing to engage. "I don't care what the problem is, I need quiet. My work laptop is on the kitchen table, and I need to use it. Now." She rolled her eyes but grabbed Shane by the arm, dragging him out of the apartment. They continued their argument in the hallway, their voices fading as they went down the stairs. I shook my head, cleaned up their mess, and sat down to work. My laptop was my lifeline. It held my entire project, years of personal files, and was a top-of-the-line model my company had issued me. Beside it on the counter was my small, velvet-lined jewelry box. It wasn't filled with diamonds, but it held sentimental treasures. My grandmother's locket, a pair of pearl earrings my dad gave me for graduation, and a simple gold bracelet I'd bought myself after my first big promotion. I was planning to wear the earrings for the presentation to give myself a little boost of confidence. After working for 2 hours, I felt prepared. I closed the laptop, placed the jewelry box back on my dresser, and went to bed, exhausted and emotionally drained. The argument with Willow had left a sour taste in my mouth, but I chalked it up to another night in a very long 2 months. The silence that woke me was the first clue. Usually I could hear Willow moving around, her late-night rustling or early-morning phone alarms, but the apartment was still, eerily still. My alarm clock read 6:00 a.m. A sliver of morning light was cutting through the blinds. I got out of bed, a strange sense of unease creeping over me. The living room was empty. The pile of blankets and pillows on the couch where Willow slept was gone. Her duffel bags were gone. The box of art supplies was gone. She was gone. For a moment, a wave of pure relief washed over me. She'd finally left. Maybe she'd had enough of my rules. Maybe she and Shane had patched things up and found a place to go. It was abrupt, but maybe it was for the best. Then my eyes scanned the kitchen counter. The spot where I'd left my laptop was empty. My heart skipped a beat. No, she wouldn't. She couldn't. I rushed back to my bedroom, my hands shaking. I looked on my dresser. The small, velvet-lined jewelry box was gone. Panic began to set in, cold and sharp. I tore through my room, then the living room, checking every possible surface, knowing deep down it was pointless. My laptop, with the most important presentation of my career on it, was gone. My grandmother's locket, my graduation pearls, all gone. She had taken them. I grabbed my phone to call her. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. I sent a furious text. "Willow, where are my things? Call me right now." No response. I called our mom, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and panic. "Daisy, honey, what's wrong? It's so early." "She's gone, Mom," I choked out. "Willow is gone, and she took my laptop and all my jewelry." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then, the inevitable defense began. "Oh, honey, there must be a misunderstanding. She probably just borrowed the laptop. Maybe she needed it to apply for a job. She stole from me, Mom. I yelled, tears of frustration streaming down my face. She waited until I was asleep and she robbed me. She and Shane, they planned this. Now, let's not jump to conclusions about that boy, Carol said, her voice frustratingly calm. I'm sure there's a simple explanation. Willow wouldn't do that. She loves you. The conversation went in circles, with my mom making excuses and me growing more and more hysterical. She promised to try and get a hold of Willow. I hung up the phone feeling completely and utterly alone. The betrayal was a physical ache in my chest. It wasn't just about the objects, though losing them was devastating enough. It was the calculated nature of the act. She had shared my home, eaten my food, accepted my help, all while planning to violate my trust in the most intimate way possible. She hadn't just left, she had plundered my life on her way out. That morning, I had to call my boss and explain that the presentation was off. The humiliation of telling him my company laptop had been stolen by my own sister from my own home was gut-wrenching. I felt foolish, naive, and incredibly stupid for ever letting her in. The silence in my apartment was no longer peaceful. It was a testament to my broken trust and her profound betrayal. The hours after discovering the theft were a blur of shame and anxiety. I filed a police report over the phone, the officer's dispassionate voice making the violation feel bureaucratic and small. He took my statement, the list of stolen items, and Willow's name, but warned me that domestic disputes like this were tricky and often went nowhere. Without a witness or evidence of a break-in, it's your word against hers, he'd said, his tone implying I shouldn't get my hopes up. I felt defeated. My own sister had robbed me, and it seemed like there was nothing I could do about it. The apartment felt tainted, every corner a reminder of my misplaced trust. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, fielding calls from my worried mother who kept insisting it was all a huge misunderstanding. Maybe she just packed it by accident, Daisy, Carol suggested for the 10th time. Her things were right there next to the kitchen table. It could have been an honest mistake. Mom, she took my jewelry box from my bedroom dresser. Was that a mistake too? I snapped, my patience worn to a thread. She knew exactly what she was doing. You don't know that, she murmured, but her defense was sounding weaker even to her. By evening, I was emotionally exhausted and resigned to the loss. I had accepted that my laptop was gone forever, along with my presentation and my irreplaceable jewelry. The financial cost was significant, but the emotional cost was catastrophic. I had lost a sister, and the naive part of me that believed in the good of family had been irrevocably damaged. I was sitting on my couch, the one Willow had occupied for 2 months, staring blankly at the wall when my phone buzzed with an email notification. The subject line was simple: footage from last night. It was from Leo, the building superintendent. Leo was a quiet, no-nonsense man in his mid-40s who had been with the building for years. We had a friendly but professional relationship. We'd chat about the weather when we passed in the lobby, and he was always prompt about fixing any maintenance issues. I had called him that morning in a panic, asking if he'd seen Willow leave and explaining what had happened. He had been sympathetic, but hadn't offered much hope. I'll check the security cameras, Daisy, but the one in the lobby is a bit grainy. I'll see what I can find. I hadn't expected to hear back, assuming it was a dead end. My heart pounded as I opened the email. There was no text, just a video file attached. I clicked play, and the grainy, time-stamped footage from the lobby camera filled my screen. The time read 3:17 a.m. The lobby was empty and dark, lit only by a single fluorescent light over the mailboxes. Then the elevator door slid open. Willow appeared, dragging her duffel bags. She looked over her shoulder nervously. A few seconds later, Shane emerged, and my blood ran cold. In his hands, he was carrying my laptop bag. He was holding it so casually, as if it were his own. My laptop, the proof. But it got worse. He set the laptop bag down and went back into the elevator, reappearing a moment later with my jewelry box tucked under his arm. My small, velvet box. The sight of it in his hands sent a fresh wave of fury through me. Willow was now propping the main door open. They weren't just leaving, they were systematically looting my life. They made 2 more trips, carrying her other belongings. Then, the camera angle from the exterior of the building began. It was aimed at the street in front of the main entrance, a designated loading zone. A beat-up, dark blue sedan pulled up to the curb. Shane opened the trunk, and they started loading Willow's things inside. Then he carefully placed my laptop bag and my jewelry box in the back seat. As they were about to finish, Willow turned and looked directly towards the camera. It was only for a second, a fleeting glance, but her expression was one of cold indifference. There was no remorse, no conflict, just the blank look of someone getting a job done. Shane slammed the trunk shut and got into the driver's seat. Willow got into the passenger side. And then came the moment that changed everything. The sedan pulled away from the curb, its Rhea. Our bumper passing directly under a bright streetlight. The camera zoomed in slightly, as if Leo himself had controlled it. For 5 clear, undeniable seconds, the license plate was perfectly visible. The image was so crisp I could read every letter and number. I paused the video, my hand trembling as I wrote down the license plate number. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. The police officer had said I needed evidence. The universe, via Leo's diligence, had just handed it to me. This wasn't just a grainy, inconclusive video. This was a digital witness. It showed my sister and her boyfriend in the middle of the night, carrying my specific, identifiable property out of my building and loading it into their car. And now I had their license plate. The feeling of helplessness that had crippled me all day evaporated, replaced by a surge of icy resolve. This was no longer just a family dispute. It was a crime, and I had the proof. My mom could make all the excuses she wanted, but she couldn't argue with a video. Willow hadn't made a mistake. She had made a choice. And now she was going to have to face the consequences. I saved the video file to 3 separate locations, my mind already racing, plotting my next move. The next morning, I woke up with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. The grief and shock had been replaced by a laser-focused determination. I watched the video again, this time not with the eyes of a betrayed sister, but as a strategist analyzing enemy movements. Every detail was a clue. Willow's nervous glances, Shane's casual entitlement, the make and model of the car, it was all evidence. I emailed a copy of the video and the license plate number to the police officer who had taken my report with a subject line that read, "New evidence regarding case number." This time, I knew they would have to take me seriously. While waiting for the police to respond, I decided to do some investigating of my own. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for the wheels of justice to slowly grind. That license plate was a key, and I was going to find the door it unlocked. I logged onto a public records search website, the kind that charges a small fee to run a plate. I paid the $20 without a second thought. My hands were clammy as I typed in the sequence of letters and numbers from the video. I hit enter and waited. A few seconds later, the results popped up. The car, a 2008 dark blue Honda Civic, was registered to one Shane M. Miller, with an address across town in a notoriously run-down apartment complex. I stared at the address on the screen. It was all real now. He wasn't some phantom boyfriend. He was a person with a name and a place to live. And that place was likely where my laptop and jewelry were at this very moment. My first instinct was to drive over there, to bang on the door and confront them, but I knew that would be foolish. It would tip them off, give them a chance to hide or sell my things, and it could even put me in danger. No, my approach needed to be more calculated. I had the what and the where. Now I needed the how. How could I get my things back and ensure they faced real consequences? Just as I was contemplating my next move, my phone rang. It was my mother, Carol. Her voice was different this time, not defensive, but shaky and uncertain. "Daisy, I finally got a hold of Willow," she said. I gripped the phone, my knuckles turning white. And what did she say? She said she needed the laptop to look for jobs, that she was going to tell you. She said the jewelry was just. She was holding it for safekeeping, Carol relayed, but the words sounded hollow, like she was reading from a script she didn't believe herself. "Safekeeping? Mom, are you listening to yourself? She's a thief." I have her on video, I said, my voice cold and hard. She's scared, Daisy. She's crying. She said you're blowing this all out of proportion. She promised she'd give it all back if you just calm down and don't involve the police. There it was, the manipulation. The attempt to turn me into the aggressor, the unreasonable one. She wasn't sorry she did it. She was sorry she was about to get caught. It's too late for that, Mom, I said flatly. I've already sent the evidence to the police. They have the video, and they have Shane's address. A sharp intake of breath on the other end. Her life will be ruined. She'll have a criminal record. She's your sister. She should have thought about that before she stole from me, I replied. The emotional blackmail that had worked on me for decades had lost its power. The video had severed those strings. I have to go, Mom. I hung up before she could protest further. The conversation, though infuriating, gave me a crucial piece of information. They were scared. They knew I had leverage, and they were desperate. They would be expecting the police. They probably wouldn't be expecting me. Later that afternoon, Detective Miller, no, relation to Shane, thankfully, called me back. His tone was completely different from the first officer's. Ms. Thompson, we've reviewed the footage. This changes things. We have enough to obtain a warrant to search the premises for your stolen property. When will you do that? I asked, a surge of triumph running through me. It takes a bit of time to get the warrant approved. Could be a day or two, he explained. In the meantime, do not, under any circumstances, try to contact them or go to the address yourself. Let us handle it. I agreed, but a seed of doubt was planted in my mind. A day or two was more than enough time for them to panic and get rid of everything. Pawn shops were plentiful in their part of town. My laptop could be wiped and sold on Craigslist in a matter of hours. My grandmother's locket could be melted down for cash. The police were a powerful tool, but they were a slow one. I needed to act faster. I needed to know if my things were still there. I wasn't going to confront them, but I wasn't going to sit at home and wait either. That evening, I put on a baseball cap and sunglasses, got in my car, and drove to the address I'd found online. The apartment complex was even grimmer than I'd imagined. I found a parking spot across the street where I had a clear view of the entrance to their building. I saw the blue Honda Civic parked in a designated spot. They were home. Now, all I had to do was watch, wait, and figure out how to force their hand before my property disappeared for good. For 2 days, I lived a double life. By day, I was Daisy Thompson, marketing manager, fielding work calls and emails, pretending that my world wasn't imploding. By night, I was a private investigator, parked in my car across the street from Shane Miller's dilapidated apartment building. I watched them come and go. I saw them leave for fast food runs and return with greasy paper bags. I saw Willow walking a small, fluffy dog, presumably for a few bucks. They looked like any other couple struggling to get by, not like criminals who had just committed a felony. That's what angered me the most, their sheer normalcy. They had shattered my peace and felt absolutely no visible remorse. On the second night of my surveillance, I saw something that made my stomach clench. Shane came out of the building carrying a black backpack that looked suspiciously like my laptop bag. He got into his car and drove off. My mind raced with worst-case scenarios. Was he on his way to a pawn shop? Was he meeting a buyer from an online marketplace? I followed him, keeping a safe distance, my heart hammering against my ribs. He drove for 10 minutes and pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour electronics store. I watched as he went inside, my mind spinning. Was he buying a cable? A tool to wipe the hard drive? He emerged 15 minutes later with a small plastic bag and drove straight back to the apartment. It was a small detail, but it told me something important. As of that moment, he likely still had the laptop. The immediate danger of it being sold had passed, but his trip to the store meant he was actively trying to do something with it. The clock was ticking. The police had called that afternoon to say they'd secured the warrant, but the earliest they could execute it was the next morning. I knew I couldn't wait that long. I needed to create a situation that would force their hand, a situation where they would reveal the location of my things, preferably out in the open. I needed to lure them out. My marketing brain kicked into gear. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was running a campaign, and my target audience was a pair of greedy, desperate thieves. What was their motivation? Money. What was their weakness? Stupidity. I formulated a plan. It was risky and relied on a bit of psychological manipulation, but it was better than sitting back and letting a warrant potentially turn up nothing. The first step was to create a sense of urgency and opportunity. Using a burner email address, I created a fake online ad on a popular resale website. The ad was for a gently used high-end laptop, with specs matching my stolen one exactly. I listed it for $400, a price that was low enough to be an incredible deal, guaranteeing a flood of interest, but not so low as to seem like an obvious scam. I posted the ad, and within an hour, the burner email had over 50 replies. This was the bait. The second step was to make sure my specific targets saw the bait. I needed to plant the idea in their heads that other people were selling similar laptops, and that the market value was dropping fast. The longer they held onto mine, the less it would be worth. I switched tactics and logged onto a popular community forum for their specific neighborhood. Using another anonymous account, I wrote a post. Beware, laptop theft ring operating in the area. They're stealing high-end laptops and flipping them for quick cash, $300 400 online. Just saw another one. Posted, police are investigating. I even included a link to my own fake ad as an example. It was a message designed to hit all their weak spots. It created competition, devalued the stolen goods, and stoked their paranoia about getting caught. They were amateur criminals. Amateurs make mistakes when they panic. The final and most crucial step was the direct lure. I had to get them to a specific place at a specific time. This was the trickiest part. I couldn't contact them directly, but I could contact my mom. I knew she was talking to Willow, acting as a go-between. I called Carol, adopting a completely different tone. I was no longer angry, I was defeated and heartbroken. "Mom," I said, my voice thick with fake emotion. "I can't do this. I can't be the reason my own sister gets a criminal record. It's eating me alive." "Oh, Daisy," she said, relief flooding her voice. "I knew you'd come to your senses. Family is more important." "I called the detective and told him to hold off on the warrant," I lied. "I told them I wanted to handle this myself. I just want my grandmother's locket back, Mom. The laptop is just a thing, work can replace it. But that locket," I let my voice trail off. "Of course, sweetie, I'll tell her. Tell her I will give her $500, no questions asked, if she just gives me back the jewelry box," I said, playing my final card. "I don't even want to see her. Tell her to leave it with the cashier at the 24-hour coffee shop on Elm Street tomorrow at noon. The cashier, a guy named Tom, is a friend. He'll hold it for me. Once he texts me that he has it, I'll send her the money, and it'll all be over." It was a web of lies. There was no friend named Tom. I wasn't dropping the charges. The $500 was real, but it wasn't for the jewelry. It was the final piece of bait to get them out in the open. They were greedy enough to steal from me, so they'd be greedy enough to want the cash on top of whatever they'd get for pawning my things. My mother eagerly agreed, promising to pass along the message. The net was woven. All I had to do now was wait and see if the flies would be foolish enough to walk into my parlor. The next morning at 11:30 a.m., I was sitting in my car in the parking lot across from the Elm Street coffee shop. I was not alone. In the passenger seat was Detective Miller. After I'd laid out my plan to him the night before, he had been skeptical, even a little annoyed that I'd gone against his orders to stay away. But when I explained the psychology behind it, the fake ads, the community post, the final lure, he saw the strategic value. "It's unorthodox," he'd admitted, "but if they're as amateur as you say, it just might work. We'll be there as backup. But if they show up, you let us handle the confrontation." I had agreed. 2 other plainclothes officers were sitting in an unmarked car a few spots down. We all had a clear view of the coffee shop entrance. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mom. She agreed. "She's on her way there now. Please be nice to her, Daisy. She's very fragile." Fragile, the word made me laugh without humor. I typed back a simple, okay, and put the phone down. My hands were sweating. Despite my anger and resolve, the thought of seeing her again made my stomach turn. This wasn't some stranger, this was my sister. The little girl I'd taught how to ride a bike, the teenager I'd given advice to about boys. How had we ended up here? "You doing okay?" Detective Miller asked, his eyes scanning the street. "Just ready for this to be over," I said, my voice quiet. At 11:58 a.m., the dark blue Honda Civic pulled into the coffee shop parking lot. My breath caught in my throat. It parked 3 spots away from the entrance. The engine cut, but for a full minute, nobody got out. They were hesitating, panicking. "They're spooked," the detective murmured into his radio. "Hold positions." Finally, the passenger door opened and Willow got out. She looked thin and pale, her hair a mess. She was clutching a small canvas tote bag to her chest. She glanced around the parking lot, her eyes darting nervously from car to car. She didn't look at my vehicle. She walked quickly towards the entrance of the coffee shop, pulled the door open, and disappeared inside. "She's inside," Miller said. "Wait for the signal." My part of the plan was now in motion. Inside the coffee shop, another plainclothes officer was sitting at a table, pretending to work on her laptop. She was the one who would give the signal. Willow walked up to the counter. The barista, a young man with a pierced eyebrow, looked at her expectantly. From my vantage point, I couldn't hear their conversation, but I could see the confusion on the barista's face. Willow was asking for Tom, the friend I had invented. The barista shook his head, shrugged, and called over his manager. There was more confused conversation. Willow was getting agitated, her posture growing more tense. This was the moment of truth. Would she R? Eli's it was a trap and bolt. Then I saw her put the canvas tote bag on the counter. She unzipped it and pulled out my velvet jewelry box. My heart leaped into my throat. She had it. She had actually brought it. She seemed to be explaining something to the manager, probably my fabricated story about leaving it for a friend. The officer inside the coffee shop subtly lifted her coffee cup, the prearranged signal. "Go time," Detective Miller said into his radio. He opened his door and got out. The 2 other officers in the nearby car did the same. They moved quickly and quietly, converging on the entrance. I stayed in the car, my heart pounding like a drum. I watched as they entered the coffee shop. A moment later, I saw Shane burst out of their car, his eyes wide with panic. He had clearly been the lookout and had seen the officers go in. He fumbled with his keys, trying to start the car. But before he could get the engine to turn over, the 4th officer, the one who had been inside, was at his window, flashing her badge. Shane's shoulders slumped in defeat. A few minutes later, Detective Miller and another officer escorted a handcuffed Willow out of the coffee shop. When she saw me sitting in my car, her face crumpled. Her eyes, filled with tears, locked with mine. There was no anger in her expression now, only a look of pure, pathetic shock. She looked like a child who had been caught with her hand in the cookie jar, unable to comprehend the scale of her punishment. They placed her in the back of one of the unmarked cars. Detective Miller walked over to my window and tapped on the glass. I rolled it down. "We recovered your jewelry box," he said, and she confessed immediately. "Told us the laptop is in their apartment, right where you thought it would be. Shane is cooperating as well. You did good." He handed me my velvet box. I opened it. Everything was there. The locket, the pearls, the bracelet. I closed the lid, a wave of profound, bone-deep relief washing over me. It was over. As they drove Willow away, I didn't feel the triumph I expected. I didn't feel happy or vindicated. I just felt empty. It was a hollow victory, won at a terrible cost. I had got my things back, but I had lost my sister for good. The aftermath was messy and painful, a slow untangling of legal procedures and fractured family ties. Willow and Shane were charged with felony theft. Given their cooperation and lack of prior offenses, their lawyers were able to arrange a plea deal. They pleaded guilty, were sentenced to 5 years of probation, ordered to complete 200 hours of community service, and most importantly, had to pay full restitution for the value of the laptop and court-mandated counseling. A restraining order was also put in place, a legal barrier to reinforce the personal one I had already erected. I never had to testify in court, a small mercy I was deeply grateful for. My mother, Carol, was devastated. For weeks after the arrest, she vacillated between blaming me for being too harsh and blaming herself for being too lenient with Willow her whole life. Our phone calls were strained and circular. "I just don't understand how you could do this to your own sister," she would cry one day. "She's getting the help she needs, Mom. Help you and I could never give her," I would reply, my voice flat and tired. The next day she would call and say, "You were right, Daisy, I enabled her. I let this happen." But a few days later, the cycle would begin again. It was exhausting. I knew she was grieving the loss of the daughter she thought she had and the idealized image of our perfect family. I had to create distance, limiting our calls and keeping the topics light and superficial. It was the only way to protect my own fragile peace. Our relationship has never fully recovered. There is a permanent scar of resentment and misunderstanding between us. A quiet acknowledgement that I chose my own well-being over the family's unspoken rule of protecting Willow at all costs. About 6 months after the sentencing, a package arrived at my door. It was a small, clumsily wrapped box with no return address, but I knew who it was from. Inside was a letter, written in Willow's familiar, loopy handwriting. "Daisy," it began, "I know you don't want to hear from me, and the restraining order says I can't contact you, but I hope getting this letter is okay. I'm in therapy now. The real kind, not the kind Mom used to try and make me go to. I've been diagnosed with a few things I'm not going to bore you with, but it helps explain some of my choices, even though it doesn't excuse them. I wanted to say I'm sorry, not just for stealing your things, but for everything. For being a terrible sister for years, for taking advantage of you. You were the only person who was ever truly stable in my life, and I resented you for it while also depending on it. It was selfish and destructive. What I did was unforgivable, and I don't expect you to forgive M. I just wanted you to know that I know it was unforgivable. I'm working now at an animal shelter. It's not much, but it's a start. The restitution payments I'm sending are my priority. I hope one day I can pay you back for everything." The letter was signed simply, Willow. I read the letter 3 times. There were no excuses, no manipulation, no attempts to guilt me. It was the most honest and accountable thing I had ever received from her. I folded it up and put it in a drawer. It didn't magically heal the wound she had carved into my life, but it was a balm. It allowed a tiny sliver of hope to enter my heart, not for a reconciliation, but for her. A hope that she might actually find her way and build a life for herself, one that didn't involve leaving a trail of destruction in her wake. I never wrote back. The restraining order was a boundary I needed to respect, for both our sakes. The trust was too broken, the betrayal too deep to ever be repaired. Sometimes you have to love someone from a great distance, wishing them well, but knowing you can never let them back through your door. Today, my apartment is quiet again. It's my sanctuary, a space filled with peace and security. I have a new work laptop, and I've slowly started to rebuild my jewelry collection, this time with pieces that symbolize my own strength and resilience. The ordeal taught me a harsh but valuable lesson about boundaries. Family is not a blank check for forgiveness, and love does not require self-sacrifice to the point of self-destruction. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself, and even for the other person, is to let go, close the door, and turn the lock. I found peace not in revenge, but in reclaiming my life and my home. The price was losing a sister, but the reward was gaining myself back.